Hey reader, welcome back to the channel, and today we are continuing in our In Defense of series looking at an oft passed over Japanese vehicle, and that is the Honi Tank Destroyer. Now, I should note in passing, we are pretty early on into 3rd edition, and we haven't gotten the Armies of Imperial Japan book yet. So it's possible that this may see some changes. I highly doubt it, but we'll see. Today we're going to be looking at the Honi. Now, there's a legitimate question here because I haven't seen too many people actually run Japan right now in 3rd edition. So I don't know for sure whether this should even be on the list, but I feel like a lot of people pass it over for a lot of reasons, and I understand their reasons. So I've included it in our In Defensive series. But partially, I think why people don't tend to like it is because it's damage value 7 plus and open topped, or damage value 8 plus in the case of the Honi 3, which we'll talk about as well today. At 130 points regular, it's pretty similar in cost to a Chiha. You know, like you're getting something that's weaker, something that's a lot more fragile, and you're getting a perfectly serviceable, perfectly excellent tank with the Type 97 Chiha. They're actually built on the same chassis, interestingly enough, which kind of makes sense. It simplifies logistics a lot when a lot of your tank vehicles are all built on the same chassis. But the result is, especially since the starter army comes with Chiha and it doesn't come with the ability to make it into a Honi tank destroyer, a lot of people are probably going to look and say, why would I go out and buy a whole new armored vehicle when I've already got one that works at home, right? It doesn't have any machine guns either. It only has the big gun. So it's only one attack dice per turn. And I think some people look at that and they say, wow, that is a whole lot of either maybe it does something, maybe it doesn't. And that doesn't sound exciting to them. And I get it. I get it. I understand that a lot because I tend to make a lot of similar decisions myself. And in 2nd edition, and we've seen this before when we looked at the LVT4 Ronson Flamethrower, I think they're right. A lot of it also just came down to they were so starved for armor slots. Like, why would you take this unit at 140 points regular? It was more expensive last edition, when you could pay 15 more points and take a Chiha Kaishinoto that's more resilient. It has a turret instead of being forward facing only, and it has the exact same gun armament. Oh, and machine guns, right? So like, I think in 2nd edition, I'm not gonna lie. If I was doing this in defensive series as part of 2nd edition, I don't think the Honi would actually make the list, because the Chiha was really, really good within that role. I still think that the Chiha is really great, and you should have a number of those in your army. But I do think it's worth looking at the Honi Tank Destroyer. So to start off with, what is the Honi Tank Destroyer? This is a copy of the Honi 1. You can tell because it's completely open over here in the back. This is a print from, I believe it's Wargame 3D, off of Wargaming 3D. They did a whole series on Imperial Japanese tanks as part of a Kickstarter, so I ended up backing that. But this is kind of the definition of a glass cannon armored vehicle. So we're not going all the way down to soft skinned, but it's a glass cannon armored vehicle that has no turret. It's just firepower on the cheap. And so if you look on the main rulebook at page 275, you'll see these 2 entries. The first one for the Honi 1 and the second one for the Honi 3, which is that, lower one down there. In the in terms of options, you'll notice you can only take it inexperienced or regular, right? And that's not horrible. It just means that, veteran is nice because you pass order test more likely. Veteran, some people think maybe nice because you can avoid pins. At damage value 7, damage value 8, I don't think you're actually going to be avoiding too many pins, right? Like you'll avoid a heavy machine gun doing pins. If you're a veteran Honi 3, I don't think it would be worth the points you'd be paying in order to get it, because you'd be over 150 points at that point. So I think it's fine. You're looking at a damage value 7 plus and open topped if you end up taking the cheaper 130 point Honi 1. And while it has a medium AT gun that's forward facing, just like the Honi 3 does, the big difference, and the reason why, even though the Honi 3 is not open topped and it is also damage value 8 instead of damage value 7, is that the Honi 1 is versatile. So you can fire it either as an AT gun or as a light howitzer, both of which are really nice. So it becomes a little more of a useful tool. The Honi 3, which looks like this, insert commentary from the exact same Kickstarter. You'll notice completely enclosed, right? Always nice. So the Honi 3 is more of a dedicated anti-armor hunter, which in 3rd edition is great because people run a lot of armor, right? And rightly so, because armor is really good. The Honi 1, on the other hand, is still really good at hunting armor. It is more susceptible to pins. It is more fragile, but it also is a little more flexible because it can do an awful lot against infantry. So why are they overlooked? Why do people not run these things? A couple of reasons. First of all, it is very fragile for being 130 points, right? At 130 points, you can typically get a nicely buttoned up damage IU 8 plus light AT gun with a coaxial machine gun and an extra machine gun style light tank for a lot of other armies. And you are getting a weaker, far more easily pinned, admittedly more powerful against armored vehicle. And so I think a lot of people just look at it and they say, okay, so it's almost a Chiha, but I think it's worth it to take the Chiha over either of these because you can get a lot more of the stuff that you want, right? The Honi 1 specifically is also highly susceptible to pins. So a lot of people look at it and they say, oh, I don't want to have a bunch of pins on my vehicle. I'm going to be rallying all the time. I don't like that. So they don't want to run it. It also doesn't have a turret, which means that you are more likely to have to advance in order to take on enemies instead of just being able to fire, which means you're not only losing the AT gun +1 to hit that you get from the anti-tank gun special rule, you're also getting that additional -1 to hit from moving and shooting with the advance order. So you're moving from starting at a 3+ to hit to a 5+ to hit, which is dramatic. And pins add on top of that, right? So yeah, the fact that it isn't turreted does make a big difference, okay? It does not get doubled movement on roads like it did in previous editions. So I think a lot of people look at it and they say, I'm going to have a tracked vehicle. It better be doing work for me because I'm going to have to really maneuver it in order to get it around. And it is frankly also just an expensive kit. You're paying $54 USD in, as of this current writing, in order to get a resin plus metal kit. Compare that to a plastic Chiha, which goes for not quite half, but close to half, and less than half if you're including the one that's in the starter army box. A lot of people might look at it and say, why would I spend money on these, right? And admittedly, that's a fair argument. That's why I 3D printed both of these, right? I mean, I paid $5-6, in material in order to make these things, right? Like I will play around with all kinds of tanks if I am spending, the cost of one plastic tank kit to get 2 or more of these things. So why would you take it? Well, first of all, offensively, this is a medium AT gun to give you good armor penetration. And in the case of the Honi 1, it also means you get a light howitzer for good infantry suppression. So it becomes a very useful multi-tool as long as you hit with that first shot, because you're only rolling 1 dice per turn. More on that a little bit later when we talk about how to use it, okay? It is casement mounted, which on the one hand means, yes, it is harder to track armor. However, number 1, this means if you know that there's an approach vector that you need to do in order to get to an objective, you know where the enemy has to be in order to stop you. So suddenly being forward facing only is not nearly as much of a problem. Okay. Second of all, some armor also doesn't have a turret and they don't want to be yanking themselves all around the board in order to try to escape you. They're going to line up and start taking shots, especially if they've got a medium or heavy AT gun. They're going to feel good about their chances. Make sure that you've got yourself some good cover, as we'll talk about in a little bit. And then suddenly you just return fire against them. And guess what? For the whole rest of the game, you guys are just going to trade shots. Okay. You can also use it very nicely if you need to do Overwatch. So if you know an opponent might come from a specific angle in order to get in, you can put this thing on ambush and hit stuff really hard, or just keep it there, wait for things to come around, and then fire. Now, the benefit of this thing on ambush is it is a great option for hitting enemy armor, especially if they're coming in off of reserves, right? If they're ambushing from the side and you've had this thing lined up to cover a whole firing arc and they come into that arc because that's the easy place to do it, bam, you knock them out. You make sure that they're not going to be at long range from you and you're good to go. With a medium AT gun, it actually is pretty hard to be at long range. The one trade-off that I have with ambush is that you have to declare what you're loading. In the case of a versatile gun, you do have to declare which way you're doing it. So if you are worried about infantry, make sure that you're versatile and you're loading your HE blast. If you know that you are going to be hitting enemy armor, go ahead and hit your AP shell and get that medium AT gun ready to roll. Okay. It's going to work out pretty well, but you do have to kind of think of it ahead. The big benefit of kind of sitting in a position, waiting, letting the enemy come around, weather, whatever it is, and then responding is that you'll always have the right tool for when they come at you. And it also means, in the case of the Honi 1, that it is capable of indirect fire with a spotter, right? Now, you have to take this thing regular in order to have that option available. And I don't think you should be doing indirect fire all the time. If you want to do that, there are other excellent platforms that can also fill the need for you instead of having to go with a Hony 1. But in this case, hey, like, partially why I take these things regular is just that they'll pass order test more likely. But another reason why I consider taking it on these things is because if I want to be able to use a spotter, I want to have the option. So defensively, what are you looking at? You are looking at a damage value 7+, which is not good. And it's open topped, which is also not good. And admittedly, you can get cover on this thing and relatively easily. They're not particularly tall. They're only slightly taller than your average infantryman. But that's still not very good, right? You only get the 9-inch move and attack, 18-inch move to redeploy, which is pretty slow, all things considered. You're really not paying for survival. That's, your defensive capabilities is not where it's at. Now, the Hony 3 for only 5 points more, admittedly, you're losing some firepower options because you lose the versatile, but your damage value 8+ and you're fully buttoned up. That is not bad at all, okay? And at only 5 points more, you're still running, when you compare it to, say, like the Kai Shinoda variant of the Chiha, you're still running a good 20 points cheaper than the Chiha, right? So it's not horrible. And all you're losing that point is a machine gun shot and that, howitzer on swivel is really the only thing that you're missing. So in terms of utility, what does it do? It can be heavy cover for infantry. It's not going to fully obscure models unless you have like a whole squad that's just the guys lying down, right? Or something like that. A light mortar team where one of them's lying on the ground, the other one's kneeing, is taking a knee and he's getting ready to fire or whatever. You might be able to fully obscure that unit possibly behind one of these, but honestly, not really. What you're really doing here is that it's going to be heavy cover if people have to shoot through it in order to get to your guys, which is really good. It's also built on the Chiha chassis, so it is a cheaper cover on approach than buying your bigger cousins, right? So, yes, even a damage value 7+ open topped is not that survivable, but the cover that you're getting from this 130 point medium AT gun is the exact same cover you would be getting on that 155 point Kai Shinoda Chiha variant, right? So, like, it's 6 of one, half dozen of another. But I think personally, if I'm looking at it, I think that's really good because that extra 25 points is potentially another order dice, which I can always use more of. So when you're deploying it, when you're moving it, what kinds of things should we be thinking about? So first of all, you want it to start deployed or in first wave. This is not the kind of unit that you want to leave in reserve. You can leave it in reserve if you want to make sure you see where the enemy armor is, and then you swoop out of nowhere and you hit it. The problem that you're probably going to have is that, number one, you're probably going to be hitting on 5s on turn 2, which is not good odds, which means you're probably not going to get your first hit in until turn 3. And 2, if you can have something like a stone wall in front of these guys, you can just leave them aiming forward at whatever it is that could potentially be a danger. And you can shoot at it starting first on 3s, which is really, really nice. You could start doing your damage as early as turn 1. So you're not just passing up on 1 turn's worth of shooting. You're actually potentially, for all practical purposes, passing up on 2, which is a lot, okay, when you're only paying for something to be a headhunter, okay? I would deploy this midway through deployment, okay? On the one hand, it can be nice to save it until really late, but between transports holding stuff and really, really soft targets that you don't want blown up and things like that, there are a lot of other units you would probably prefer to wait for. As long as you see where the enemy is placing some of their larger infantry sections, if you're taking the Hony 1 and you have the light howitzer option, or if they've placed one armored vehicle or a transport, that's when you start dropping these things down, right? So that way you can see what's going on. In terms of attack vector, when you're moving to attack, make sure that you're looking for your firing lanes with cover because you are going to need a cover safe. Full stop, okay? And then keep your options open for potentially suppressing enemy infantry once the armor's cleared, okay? It's not necessarily like great to play this thing really aggressive up front. That being said, 130 points, if you can get it up to pen +6 for being right at point blank range against an enemy, oh, that's going to hurt a lot, right? So, just play it by ear. But in general, as you're moving it up, make sure that you're thinking about those lanes and you don't clog them with the rest of your troops, okay? And then in terms of what I call pack hunting, my high recommendation is going to be you got to run these things in pairs, okay? They work way better when you run 2 of them at a time, okay? It'll only run you 260 points for 2 of the Honi 1, which is not bad at all. Run them in pairs. And if you can snap the 2 of them with an officer, even better. So what is the overall value add? So first and foremost, you get cheap anti-armor, you get high explosive capabilities, especially with the Honi 1. Okay. You get cheap cover that still moves the needle for you. It's not just cover for the sake of cover. It's cover that's actually contributing to winning the battle, which is always nice. If you have a company commander nearby, honestly, this removes a lot of the negatives, right? Because suddenly being pinned relatively easily is not nearly as big of a problem because you'll still be able to fire when you really need to, right? Still rally if you want to, but you don't have to. And then in addition, obviously, if some big gun starts shooting at you and if they hit, they're probably going to blow you up. Fair enough. That's fine. Remember, they probably would have blown up that Chi-Ha too. Just being honest, you just denied him 25 points, right? You put it in another place. So again, like there are downsides. I think you can work around the downsides. I think the real question is, does it replace the need for lunge mine anti-tank teams, which is the term that I use on YouTube for describing the Japanese lunge mine guys? Okay, maybe we're going to talk about this tomorrow, so check back in tomorrow to see our whole commentary on the lunge mines. I think the need for the lunge mines goes down slightly if you have larger numbers of mobile medium anti-tank guns. If you're relying on light howitzers like the standard Chi-Ha and stuff like that, you might still want something that hits it higher than a pen +2, right? So toward that end, I think you really need them if you don't take these kinds of guys. I think if you are taking things like the Honi tank destroyers, you might be able to get away with not taking them, which is important because there are some scenarios where the lunge mine guys are not nearly as much help as you would want them to be. But what do you think? Do you think that I'm completely off it when it comes to the Honi, that I'm chalking it up a little too much? Does everybody that you know run these things and it really shouldn't make it into the indefensive series because everybody's running it? Let us know down in the comments below, and I will see you next time.